We're joined by our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, and the timing couldn't be better, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And Secretary Pompeo, I want to get to China in a minute, but I want to lead off with a question just directly because the reporting on President Biden's remarks to this Democrat fundraiser where he says if there's a use of a tactical nuclear weapon by Putin, he doesn't see any way around Armageddon. And just my direct question to you, I mean, is that really the only option is nuclear holocaust if Putin takes that kind of step?
Jordan, these remarks were both odd in terms of where they were made, how they were made, and exactly what he said. No, it's certainly not the only option. And for a president of the United States to use that language, frankly, it's seemingly kind of just wandering randomly in front of a group of donors is deeply dangerous. That's not been reported. Vladimir Putin certainly read that. Those around Vladimir Putin have read that. Leaders around the world have read that our president's talking about that in this way. And the other thing that's odd, Jordan, is he uses like the passive voice as if he doesn't have any role in this. He's the president of the United States of America. To say that there's no other option, that this is just as if he's a passive victim of this, is deeply dangerous and frankly reflective of the weak Biden foreign policy for the first 20 months of their administration. No, there are many other ways this can proceed, but most importantly, there's a lot of work to do today to make sure that Vladimir Putin doesn't use that nuclear weapon.
And supposedly they've communicated to the Russians. I guess there's one diplomatic channel. They've said this is what would happen if you do this. But then he goes to this group of donors. To your point, I mean, if he honestly believes this, and his team believes this is where we could be potentially heading, don't you think he should be addressing all of us right now? Like right now, this minute. I mean, if this is how serious it is.
Of course. If President Biden believes that this is the precipice that we sit on and that there is very little that the United States can do to prevent it from going badly, and that the ramifications are as deep and as troubling and as unavoidable as he described, he should have been on TV the moment he came to believe that, speaking to the nation, speaking to the world about the seriousness of the moment that we are in. But frankly, I think this was just another example of President Biden just off the cuff, just kind of wandering around, just speaking just extemporaneously, saying things that no president has said in a fundraising event who didn't say it, at least from the White House podium, but more importantly, to your point, to the nation from the Oval Office in an evening presentation in the way that every serious event has been handled by every president of the United States for decades and decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes it really tough for people to balance like how serious they should take. I mean, on one hand, we know it's serious when we're dealing with Russia, and if it's serious if they use any kind of nuclear weapon, even if it's a tactical nuclear weapon, and it's certainly an escalation. But then to say, to jump to Armageddon, it's a huge jump. And I know our audience, I mean, they're tuning in droves because they're trying to figure out this balance. Okay, they get the reporting and they're like, what should I be doing right now? And I think if he keeps it at, that was statement to Democratic donors, like you said, that's not an address to the nation. If you really honestly felt that way, I don't care about your partisan politics. You should be telling everybody that. But I do want to turn to you're a distinguished fellow with the Hudson Institute. You did this video series directly to the Chinese people, and it got the attention of the Chinese Communist Party. They got it in the letter. It was like it was like their version of a cease and desist. So tell people about this series.
I felt like it was important to make sure that as we talked about the risks of the Chinese Communist Party, that the Chinese people knew that we loved them and were with them, and that we understood that not all of them wanted to take Taiwan, destroy Hong Kong, to torture Uyghurs in the West. And so I put together this little series. We've done 2 of them so far. I think there are 3 or 4 more. They're short. They're a couple, 3 minutes, and they speak directly to the Chinese people about where they find themselves and how it is the United States is prepared to assist them. And boy, I tell you, this irritated the Chinese Communist Party greatly. We got a letter was sent to the Hudson Institute from the embassy, the Chinese embassy in the United States, basically saying, shut up. And then citing a poll that said that the Chinese people are happy. And it turns out this poll was conducted by a person at Harvard who'd been a former member of the Chinese Communist Party, as best we can understand. I assure you, Jordan, 90% of the Chinese people are not happy with their leadership. And I can also assure every one of your listeners that much like the ACLJ is staying in the fight and never gives up on this issue that matters so much to America. The Hudson Institute and me, we're going to stay at it, informing both the Chinese people and most importantly, American people about how we can continue our freedom and our liberty here at home.
Yeah, I mean, the second part of this that's troubling is that the poll that, just to make it clear, the poll that the Chinese Communist Party through their embassy in Washington cites in their letter saying, stop doing these videos, is a Harvard poll. And then you look at the pollster, and they've got direct ties to, as a former member of the Chinese Communist Party, say they have 90% approval. I mean, even that number, like no government has 90% approval, even in a free and fair country. And
Right.
Harvard stands behind that? I mean, that's pretty shocking.
It's a good question. I haven't heard if Harvard has responded to this or not. I suspect that Harvard will be very quiet. Look, it kind of reminds me of some of the Democrat polling. They probably took a sample that didn't quite represent all of the Chinese people. They may well have found 10 and got 9 to say what they wanted them to say. But make no mistake about it, the work that America needs to do to protect itself includes making clear that we're not against the Chinese people, that we are only trying to preserve and protect the things that matter to us. And when you see Harvard, someone connected to Harvard put out a poll talking about something that is ludicrous on its face, it tells you how much this touched a nerve inside the Chinese Communist Party, and therefore how true it must be that 90% of the people aren't in fact happy with them.
You've got a new piece up at ACLJ.org. Harvard should answer for legitimizing the Chinese Communist Party. Back to this issue with President Biden's statements on this nuclear Armageddon, just because we've seen a lot of comments coming in to folks watching the broadcast, listening to the broadcast. How serious do you think they should take this statement? I mean, like we said, it's one thing to make this statement meandering to a audience of donors, and if he doesn't do it, address the nation. But just from what you know about the situation, are we really potentially at that point of a nuclear Armageddon, or could they, by bad policies, walk us into that point?
I think that is absolutely true. I think American weakness encourages Vladimir Putin to take actions that he doesn't think will respond to in a way that will impose real costs on him. Right? We've talked about this, I think, a couple times, Jordan. This is all about the perception of risk in the head of Vladimir Putin. And the risk he's concerned about is his continued existence, his continued leadership, and then his effort to make greater Russia. And so as America falters or wanders around at fundraisers or makes statements and has people walk back what the president said, we enhance the likelihood that Vladimir Putin will think, well, I can just do this. I can use a battlefield or a tactical nuclear weapon in a way, and I can gain the upper hand when my military has failed. I think, Jordan, this is a serious moment. There's no doubt about that. I think what it requires is continued American resolve, continuing to push forward and provide the Ukrainians what they need. The more we demonstrate that we are not going to permit Vladimir Putin to push us around, to bully us, the less likely it is he will ultimately conclude that using a nuclear weapon will prove advantageous for him.
All right. As always, Secretary Pompeo, we appreciate this. The timing couldn't have been more perfect to have you on today to discuss this, but I think people are. I was at an event last night with a lot of finance folks, and they were talking one thing about the stock market, and they said, it's one thing to talk about the stock market, it's another for there's nuclear fallout, who cares? So, again, we always appreciate it. I want people to go to ACLJ.org to see your new piece, Harvard Should Answer for Legitimizing the Chinese Communist Party. Our Senior Counsel for Global Affairs, Mike Pompeo, thanks for joining us today with that insight.